Good morning, Rabotai. Welcome to Breakfast in the Class, Sukkah style. Today's Breakfast in the Class is dedicated in loving memory of Mrs. Lily Safra, Allah Shalom Li Lui Nishmat Leah Batchana, whose philanthropy has reached so many throughout the entire world. As well, dedicated in loving memory of Sinai Tur Chosh, Allah Shalom Li Lui Nishmat Sinai Tur Bat Shukrola, sponsored by her grandson Ben Chakshur. As well, dedicated in loving memory of Lui Nishmat Mago Bat Mary, Allah Shalom, sponsored by her grandsons, and by a wonderful sophomore, Sam Lowe, who dedicates the class in honor of the rabbi and the class. Baruch Hashem, what a zechut to see young people getting involved and sponsoring and appreciating the class on such a level. Finally, the week of Kobru, sponsored by David E. Ash, in honor of you and your substantial capacity to do good today and every day. Let's get cracking, Rabotai. The Gemara in Sukkot, perhaps the most famous Gemara in all of Masechet Sukkot, is got to be the machloket between two opinions as to what it is that we are commemorating when we sit in the Sukkah. Because the Pasuk says, when a person sits in the Sukkah, Leman yedu dorotechem, you're sitting in the Sukkah in order to remember and that your generations shall remember. Ki besukot ushoshavti et bnei Israel. For in Sukkot did I sit the bnei Israel b'otzi when I took them out of Egypt. I sat the Jewish people in Sukkot. Two opinions. One opinion is, what does it mean that you should remember that God sat you in Sukkot when He took you out of Egypt? It means ananei kavod. God surrounded us with clouds of glory. Okay. The other opinion says that what are we commemorating? What are we reminding ourselves? No, Sukkot mamash, actual huts. That's what Rabbi Eliezer says. Now, all the commentators asked the same exact question. Hold up. You want to tell me that there was a miraculous cloud box that followed us around, climate control, top, bottom, and 4 directions? Fine. Granted, that's a really cool thing. That's something that needs to be remembered. Do we really need to have a holiday every year to remind ourselves of Sukkot if it's just the fact that God sat us, that we actually made huts when we left Egypt? That's not a cause for such incredible celebration. We make huts all the time. Why is that something that is important, and why is it that it needs to be commemorated? So I'd like to start with a question, a very famous question, and the answer that's given by the Chidah. The Chidah asks, why is it, if we're commemorating miracles in the desert, why is it that we commemorate the Ananei Kavod, the clouds of glory, but we don't commemorate the man, we don't commemorate the Be'er Miriam, we don't commemorate the well of Miriam that traveled with the Jewish people all the time, we don't commemorate the man that fell every single day, all that kind of. So why specifically are we commemorating this miracle? This is a question that's asked by the Chidah and many other commentaries. The Chidah brings in the name of Rav Kafusi. He brings an answer, and he says the answer is as follows. Food was something that was required for survival. The water of the Be'er Miriam was something that was required for survival. You could survive in the desert even if you don't have shade. It's just very uncomfortable. Your skin gets burned, maybe you're feeling the heat a little bit too much, for your liking. But you could survive in the desert without shade. And if that is the case, so therefore, the miracles that were surrounding our survival are not as celebrated. Now, on a logical level, you think to yourself, as I can see in David's eyes, that sounds counterintuitive. The miracle that I didn't need is not as important as the miracle that I couldn't have lived without. And the answer is that's absolutely true. It is a bigger miracle. But the celebration of that miracle represents our gratitude to God for something. When God told us, follow me into the desert, what was understood that was going to be provided with that traveling in the desert? So I'll give you an example. Someone sends you on a business trip. And, there's lunch and dinner that's provided with the business trip. Yeah, there's lunch and dinner. Now, let's say I don't like the lunch and dinner. Does the guy have to provide me with more lunch and dinner? No. He gave me a lunch. I didn't like it. Go buy your own lunch, right? But if I promise you, if I tell you, you're going on I'm obligated to provide at least the minimal that you would require in order to be able to go on that business trip, do your job. If God said, follow me into the desert, there's nothing there. Zacharti lach chesed niuraich. I remember the kindness of your youth. Ahavat klulotayich. The love of our time of betrothal. Lech tech acharai b'midbar. You followed me into a desert. Be'eretz lo zeruah. In a land that had nothing planted in it. It is understood that if God says, follow me in the desert, in a place where there's no planted food, it's going to be on him to come up with the food. It's going to be on him to come up with the drink. The idea that God provided that which was not required illustrated and exemplified an element or a modicum of love to the Jewish people that we are showing gratitude for. That was not what God needed to do. When it comes to taking care of your responsibilities, you take care of what you need to take care of. When it comes to love, you take care of what you want to take care of. You go above and beyond. So therefore, the barometer for exemplifying love begins when a person goes above and beyond the basic necessities that are required in that relationship. My friends, according to this, we begin to understand the concept of Sukkot in a different light. The idea of the Ananei HaKavod represented the fact that God did something for us that he didn't need to do, and therefore we're celebrating not miracles in general, but miracles that exemplify a feeling of closeness. And therefore the concept of Sukkot, which means sitting under the shade of Borei Olam, it references and makes us feel the closeness that we have to God himself, a closeness that was exemplified by the Ananei HaKavod. Now that we understand this, we are looking with even more wonder at the other opinion in the Gemara. What does it even mean to say, God gave you huts in the desert? That's a big deal. And I saw brought in from Rav Asher Weiss a magnificent answer. He says as follows: both opinions in the Gemara understand, right? Both of them, they understand that there was Ananei HaKavod in the desert, because it's explicit pesukim that tell us that there was a cloud that guided them on the road. Everybody believes, and we all understand, that there was Ananei HaKavod in the Torah. The question in the Gemara is not if there was or wasn't clouds of glory, but rather, what did the Torah want us to celebrate? The clouds of glory or the huts? And to this end, he brings a magnificent piece. And he says as follows: Ramban writes that a person has no portion in the chelek, in Am Yisrael, in the Torah of the Jews, until they believe that each and everything that they experience, whether it is on a national level, whether it is on an individual level, is something that was sent to them directly by God himself. And no mask of nature and no mask of commonality should ever be able to help hide God's hand. And from the great and wondrous miracles, Ramban writes at the end of Parashat Bo, from the great and wondrous miracles where a person sees God's hand in a place where it could be nothing and no one but God, they begin to recognize and realize God's hand even in the mundane and in the everyday. So Rabbi Eliezer held that this which we are celebrating and commemorating with Sukkot is a common thing, a thing that was just huts, that God put us in huts and he took care of us. And that little natural expression of actual huts that God arranged for us to sit in when we left Egypt was demonstrative of every other kindness that God gave us. Whereas some of them were literally as openly miraculous as bread falling from the sky, some of them were as miracle-less as sitting in a hut that you could have ordered from Ikea or Sukkah Mart, trademark. The point, my friends, is how does a person most accurately and most successfully commemorate and install the idea of miracles in their life? And that is perhaps the machloket in the Gemara. Does a person recognize God most in the world when he finds the wondrous things and commemorates them? Or does a person most find God in the world where they hold up a mundane thing and say that I see God's hand in here, even though it's less, but I see it here because I saw it in other places? That is the source of their argument. It is perhaps a psychological disagreement, if you will, between these two opinions as to how to celebrate and inculcate the idea of a present awareness of Hashem's hand in every moment of our life. My friends, I always feel that this is a question I am forced to ask myself on Sukkot. On Sukkot there's a halakha. The halakha states that a person has to have the top of the sukkah covered with schach. But it also tells us that the schach is not allowed to be above a certain height. How high is the highest a schach is allowed to be?
20 amot.
20 amot. And the question is, why? Why can't the schach be more than 20 amot high? There's nothing in between me and the schach. Why can't it be higher than that amount? And our rabbis explain that above 20 amot is not a height that a person's eyes look. So as an example, if you're sitting in this room, you're talking with your friends, take a look for a second, take your hand and go like this. You can't see your hand. As you lower your hand, you become more aware of your hand because it enters into the top end of your peripheral vision. That's how it works. Above a certain height, the schach would be out of sight quite literally, and therefore out of mind. And if the purpose of sitting in a sukkah is lema'an yedu'u dorotechem ki basukot toshavti, the only way that's going to happen is if it is in or if it is within your line of sight. My friends, according to that, perhaps we have a deeper understanding of the opinion that held that we should be celebrating Ikea huts. Because you know what? How often is an open miracle in our line of sight?
Infrequently.
Very infrequently. It gives us very few opportunities to strengthen, to imbue faith in God and in His guidance in our everyday life and activities. Says Rabbi Eliezer, I'd rather you celebrated something that comes around all the time. The fact that something worked out, came to your house, even if you ordered it by Amazon, is on some level as much of a miracle as something that fell in through your chimney, okay? That came to you via some sort of crazy miracle. Dollars falling from the sky is not that much different than making some money on a deal that you close. But in our minds, I closed this deal, I made this happen, I brought the client, I showed them the house. So it was up to me. But ask yourself this question: how many houses, how many clients did you show that didn't result in getting the money? But for some reason, the things that we do and we engage in on a natural level, we write God out of the script. Says Rabbi Eliezer, if the point is Leman Yedu'u Dorotechem, it's not going to work if you remember Ananei HaKavod. It's not enough. Now here's where it gets interesting to me. Rabbi Eliezer agrees that there was Ananei HaKavod in the desert. But I would believe that all opinions would also agree that the concept of a sukkah that came from Ikea, that God arranged for us to have huts in the desert, that He took care of every one of our needs, and as He still takes care of every one of our needs, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is showing us a tremendous love. Not just when we need it in order to survive, not just the stories of survival that take place to the Jewish people throughout history, but even the smallest of things. Al Chachamim tell us that when David HaMelech killed Goliath, so if you remember what he did, he took a slingshot and he shot him with a rock, and the rock pierced the armor on his forehead, and Goliath died. Now if you think to yourself, this rock hit him, there was a force driving into his head. Which way should Goliath have fallen? Backwards. God caused Goliath to fall forwards. Why, say Chazal? So that David HaMelech should not be forced to walk the length of Goliath, had he fallen forward 6 amot, fell backwards another 6 amot. So for the sake of 12 amot, so that David HaMelech could come and hold up Goliath's severed head as a sign of victory to save the Jewish people from war with the Philistine, in order to save David HaMelech, those little 12 amot, what is that, 24 steps? HaKadosh Baruch Hu made a miracle, and he sent Goliath forward. Now, it's important that we understand this, because most of us have understood throughout our lives a general principle, and that is that God does not do unnecessary miracles. This is an unnecessary miracle. Why did God have Goliath fall forward to save David 24 steps? That is the definition of an unnecessary miracle. And the answer, my friends, is that if you say that, you don't understand miracles. And also you don't understand the word necessary. If you think that miracles are only to save your life, then it's unnecessary. If you think that the purpose of miracles is to give you the thing of the miracle that the miracle gave you, then you're right, it's unnecessary. But if the purpose of a miracle is to indicate and to show the level of closeness that Borei Olam has with the person, to inspire them, to draw themselves closer to God as God came closer to them. Adonai misinai ba, God came from Mount Sinai. He walked towards us, v'zarach meseir lamo, and he shone his son from that place towards us. You know, he showed us his light. He stepped towards us in a sign like a chatan does when he walks towards his bride to bring her to the chuppah. The chatan could just as easily sit at the chuppah and the bride would continue her walk with her parents all the way down the aisle. There's never been a bride who was Ashkenaz, they don't have this custom, who stood halfway down the aisle and said, if he doesn't come get me, I ain't going through with this. To my knowledge, that has never happened. Even if the bride was Sephardic, that has never happened. Why was it necessary? And the answer is, because the purpose of miracles is to inspire faith, is to inspire a closeness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's what our faith does, and that's what our miracles achieve. They bring us closer. When David HaMelech saw something so simple, and in many ways, its very unnecessariness illustrated, like Rav Kafuse said, that was brought down by the Chidah, that this is only an act of greatest love. May Hashem bless us to see the open miracles in our life. May Hashem bless us to see God in Ikea. And I thought to myself, maybe we should change the name to Ikea. Yeah, for if we see HaKadosh Baruch Hu even in the flat pack. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen. Rabbi Chananya